So AK, thank you so much for joining.
Absolutely. I'm so excited.
Oh, I'm excited too, because I'm ready to dive down this rabbit hole, and I feel like it's going to be really amazing.
I hope so. I made notes.
Oh, that would be a first on the podcast for sure.
No way.
Yeah, for real. But yeah, so can you go ahead and just introduce yourself and just tell our viewers a little bit about who you are and what you actually do?
Sure. My whole name is Alyson Kate Long. I usually go by AK because people couldn't remember Alyson. It was Ansley, Ashley, Amber, and some other random stuff. I was like, well, cool. Then we'll just use my whole name, Alyson Kate. Oh, well, that's way too long. So we just condensed it, and now it's kind of like Cher, but way less cool. I am the content director for the company that my husband started, which is called Social Burrow. We specifically do social media management and digital brand strategy for small businesses.
Wow. That actually sounds, from my perspective, like a nightmare, having to deal with all these companies and expectations that I'm sure are very high. So tell me a little about Social Burrow, right? Because that's, I guess, the Spanish word would be, there it is, is for donkey, right?
Donkey.
Which is burro. So Social Burrow.
Yep. Burro.
Awesome name, by the way.
It sounds way cooler when you say it.
Yeah, awesome name. Tell me a little bit about that. Like, how did that come about? And just to start with that, how did that come about?
Yeah. So the story behind the brand is actually really fascinating to me personally. My husband and I have been together for a decade as of this past June, and we've been married for about 5.5 years. And throughout our whole relationship, we as you start together, you grow together, and you start asking questions about life and all this stuff. And one of the things he wanted to do was start to look at all the stuff that he assumed about religions. And he's like, you know what? I'm not happy with having piecemeal information. So he went through and read all of the sacred texts from all of the world's major religions.
Wow.
Just to understand like what and why and how, because he's very much a person that creates community around him wherever he is. He's never met a stranger, and it's wonderful. For an introverted person, I love it, because I'm just like, yes, bring me the good people. I don't have to do all the emotional work to cut through the crap, right? And one of the really fascinating things about it is that the donkey or the burro shows up in almost every single religion. And
that's fascinating.
Really
that's really fascinating.
I had no idea. And it's easy to sort of the general assumption in sort of just standard secular information is, oh, it's a donkey. It's kind of whatever. It's sort of a boring, lame animal. It's actually not. It's fascinating. And at least, I think it was at least in Christianity, like it was considered the only animal humble enough to carry the cross, which is why a lot of them will have the dark stripe down the back and across the center. It's looking and digging in super deep, right? But the one thing that he really took away from that is a sort of a kindred spirit connection to the burro as a whole. And once you start reading about them as animals and as totems, because he included Native American lore in his reading, you start to realize that they're actually very community-oriented animals. They're funny. They like to laugh with each other. They have a great sense of humor, and they're extremely sure-footed, which is where the tagline sure-footed social media came from. And when they're used as pack animals on trips like down through the Grand Canyon, they actually walk directly on the edge of it, of the cliff.
Yeah.
So that they can see where the edge is. They're comfortable knowing where their boundaries are. And
isn't that just wild though? That's just wild how that they can do that. Because there's some goats that do that as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Dude, I'm over here like hugging the wall, hoping for daylight. Like,
yeah,
it stresses me out to even think about it. And so he started thinking about like, okay, well, what have I learned? What do I like? And the idea of the burro just really kind of spoke to him. And now we have, I think, 17 or 18 different types of donkey art in our house.
Nice.
One of them is actually a really beautiful one that we hang over by the doors, just kind of like a nice little talisman, coming and going, kind of guarding the house thing. This lady does what's called flame art. So she lights candles and she will let the smoke from the candle come up and create sort of the shadow on it. And then she goes back in with like erasers or marking tools and kind of things like you would use to emboss leather.
Yep.
And actually creates art from that, but using the shadows of it. And it's fascinating. I love it. She's got all kinds of cool stuff on.
Yeah, because you definitely got me. Now I'm like, I just wrote it down. And I'm like, okay, I got to look up all this content about donkeys now, just because now I'm super interested in this, and especially finding out your husband like really went in and like researched this is amazing. Not only from from like a historical but biblical sense as well. So
he did the Bible, the Quran, the Native American histories. Like it was fascinating. And the I can never pronounce it correctly, but the Buddhist text. I don't know what it is. Yeah. The Indian, I can't remember. And then the Indian text that you think this like, oh, you know, yoga's based off all this. You think, okay, this is going to be a nice, easy read, especially compared to Revelations. No, it starts out with I want to say it's Vishnu on the battlefield, and like you're 2 paragraphs in and someone's already been eviscerated. I was like, this isn't bedtime reading. Hang on. But it was really fascinating to see how that kind of came about. And we obviously don't impose any kind of beliefs on anyone that we work with. But I like that the symbolism is there. And it was a really fun experience. I think I want to say it was this past year. Yep. Because last year was very expensive. We congratulated ourselves on a successful year in business, basically meaning we didn't go out of business during COVID, right? We didn't, we paid our mortgage off. Everything was good. And we still liked each other. So success, right? And we worked with a illustrator here in Asheville to come up with a design that worked, because the original burrow, which is actually still on a couple of things, was an $11 stock find. And it was just a little vector art. He went in, he cracked it open in Illustrator and started changing a little bit of stuff to make it look like he wanted it to feel. But it had this very sort of, not somber, but it was much less engaging and dynamic. And the one that the artist helped us come up with, he really kind of dug in and figured out how to bring out the emotions and the happiness and the joy that we try to bring for all of our clients. Because at the end of the day, it's social media. We're not curing cancer, we're not delivering babies, and we don't drive ambulances. So you got to have a little fun with it.
And so tell me, so your clients, and we can dive in a little deeper about who exactly your clients are, and who you're trying to pursue. But when they come to you, right, when they approach you, what are they typically asking for?
So Frank got our first 3 clients by walking up and down Main Street 3 days after I got fired from a job that I thought was going to be super duper amazing after we moved here. And the dialogue that almost always happens, in fact, it happened earlier this week, was, I hate social media, please help. And we're like, okay, not a problem. What's there? We had to do a little bit more weeding out of people at the beginning of when we first, started the business, because there's usually 3 tiers that people will fall into. One is they hate social media because they don't understand it, but they know it can help their business, and they feel like they need to improve on that aspect of business. We consider those people like a yellow, solid yellow. So we have a green, yellow, and a red tier system that we put people into. I never tell them what the tier is though. Those people are in a really good spot, right? The green tier is super hard to find. It's usually people who are much closer to us in age, and they've started something. They may have already built up a really exciting community that's totally into it, but because they're in the business of doing something that isn't social media, they just don't have time for it, but they understand how to use it. And so we pull their excitement and their interest into it by putting them on stories and reels and stuff like that, so that all the branded, curated content that we produce for them on their feed starts to get much more visibility. They're in solid green, and I think we have like 1.5 of those.
Gotcha.
The people that are in the red tier that we definitely just flat weed out are the ones that are like, I hate social media. It's contributing to the downfall of society. Okay, well, probably not going to put that on the window of your storefront. So we should probably not put you on social right now.
And sorry for cutting you off. I wanted to ask you. So it's
Yeah.
very interesting, right? Because I'm kind of curious to find out this as well. But let's say if you and your husband approach a client, right? Potential client, and they tell you that exact thing. How does that conversation go? And what different elements do you bring into the conversation to try to make the sale to them?
So one of the things that we've had to get really, really comfortable with is saying no. And as a small business owner, that is freaking terrifying. But a very wise friend of ours, who has been in sales since the 80s, gave us this piece of advice, and it is something that I will never ever forget. How it starts is how it will end. And we're like, okay, so it makes you sit back a little bit. And if it's a person that's truly just disinterested in the types of services that we have to offer, like, we ain't chasing them. Like, we are two people. We are hammering it out 14 hours a day. Like, I ain't got time to chase you and convince you that this is the most amazing thing ever. Because for some people, it just truly isn't. If you don't have e-commerce, you don't have a service, or you don't have a genuine interest in connecting with people that you don't know, we're not right for you, and that's okay. And that is a very hard thing to come to. Like, I came into the business having done freelance for before I graduated college, so it's been an unspeakable amount of time. I think around like 14, 15 years. And once you get so used to that idea of, okay, I got to chase the next thing, I need the next thing, I got to get it, saying no is like, I had this whole, like, I had to talk to myself and get myself right and understand that it's okay. And I don't know if it's because of where we are now, if we're putting out good juju into the universe or what, but every time we say no for a valid reason, good stuff comes back to us at least twofold. Whether that's like a financial aspect or a business opportunity or anything like that, it's hard. But if we are speaking directly to someone and they're like, I really hate social, I don't like it, I have to kind of put on the psychology hat a little bit and ask them, okay, well, what's going on? Sometimes it's because they have a bunch of crap reviews on Google that are unfounded, and they don't understand how to go through the escalation process to get them mitigated, to get them removed in some cases. And they don't feel comfortable responding to this negativity because they genuinely don't understand where it's coming from. So I've got to go way back to my second internship in college, to PR days, and start to kind of work through and help them understand how to sort of change the dialogue a little bit and understand, okay, it's fine for you to stand up for yourself, but you also need to hear people. Have you reached out to this person? No, I don't want to talk to them. Okay, well, that's a problem. You've got to talk to them. So much of what we do is customer service facing or reputation management. And that came out just by virtue of having to have those conversations. That is not something that I would have ever considered adding as like a line of service.
Right. Now, is there something, sorry for cutting you off. Sorry. Is there something that you wish that maybe your clients understood about your position within Social Buro?
Yeah. So 2 things. 1, right? My title is content director. If it's relating to content, you should probably include me on the emails. I don't know. Most people do not understand this reply all function when it's a dialogue between multiple people. I don't know. It's super frustrating. And, fortunately, Frank and I both work together. We work in the same room in the house. We kind of always know what's going on with each other at the same time. So when those kind of missed opportunities could arise, we have enough intuition for one another to understand, like, if I hear you go, oh God, babe, what's up? Oh, it's this email from this client. I was like, I don't have an email from the client. What's going on? And then we can at least go straight into problem solving mode like that. The second thing is that, believe it or not, the internet is worldwide. So we have
enough
to
said,
make
period,
people,
right?
Right. I think that would be a solid full stop. a lot of times people don't necessarily see the urgency in responding to negative Google reviews. We have a healthcare client that we are actively helping train their marketing team, because they have I think 20 facilities throughout the state. So they have 20 different people who are on the hook for responding on behalf of the organization. And we are working with them to actively help them understand that if it goes out on Google, pretty much every country in the world can see it. For sure, you're only worried about the surrounding area, and most people are probably not going to fly from out of the country to come stay at one of your places. But you got to understand the ramifications in this concept of, like, if you drop the rock in the water and the ripples come out, if your rock is a 1-star review that's talking about mistreatment of the elderly, is a really nice way that I can put it. You got to address it, and running after a bunch of made up reviews is not going to do it. First of all, the law of averages happens, but we can pass on the math. Like that, it makes you look bad. Mm-hmm. And it's hard. That the healthcare one is a very stark example, but even for the companies that we work with who have a pretty small good or a service, like, it's extremely important to address those things. And there's this interesting balance between admitting fault and standing up for your company. And we sort of help them kind of find that line. That's where the sure-footed thing really comes into play, because somebody in the situation has to be cool-headed. Unfortunately, that's usually me, and I'm not so cool-headed. So
that's right. That's right.
It's been a test.
So let me ask you this, because I'm
Sure.
very curious, and we've known each other for a little time here. So I guess what I'm trying to get to is, a lot of viewers want to know, a lot of listeners want to know, like, how did you get to where you're at now, right? Because you didn't just come into it and say, okay, I'm a content director, I'm going to be managing this. There's probably a learning curve to it. And when we first met, you were very passionate, and you still are very passionate about writing, right? Yeah. So just dive in a little deep and tell me about, like, how you got to this point in your professional career.
Cool. So I'll do the really annoying fiction writing thing and start at the end, and then I'll bounce back to the front.
Perfect. Let's do it.
So to answer your immediate question, how did I get here? I wake up most mornings with that Talking Heads song in my brain on a loop. What is this house? Who is this beautiful person? How did I get here? And if you start, it's a very interesting mental exercise, especially for me, who's very good at second guessing things. We own the company. The company is us. So I can call myself whatever I want to, right? So there is this underlying imposter syndrome feeling of, am I really a content director? Oh my God, what does that mean? What do I do? I've never worked with one. What is one? So, you start the whole thing. But at the end of the day, it's really easy to shut that down, because if I stand back and I look in this big notebook, this is actually the small, big notebook. All of the questions that are in this book are process, procedure, brand foundation, strategy. So at the end of the day, all the work that I put in directs the messaging and the direction of the content. So I just have to shut myself down and move on. As for how did I get here? So I actually wrote down a list of all the people that have ever vouched for me. And that was a really, really badass feeling when I got done. Let's see. So the first one goes all the way back to the Art Institute of Atlanta, right before I graduated. Her name is Angie Lipscomb, and she was the career services professional. She and I met one-on-one, and she asked me what I like to do. I was like, well, I'm really good at writing. I've been studying copywriting. My goal straight out of college was to work for some kind of nonprofit organization. So I graduated in 2009, which meant you were lucky to get any job, paid or not paid, and nobody was really trying to not get paid right then. So I had to do kind of a hard pivot immediately. And so we had a conversation about it, and she put in my information for a marketing writer at the Atlanta Convention and Visitors Bureau. I find out after I've had a couple of interviews that the existing editorial director was going out on maternity leave and they needed somebody to just kind of fill in and keep the wheels moving, right? So I had a phone call with her. Her name is Liesl Merkel. I believe she is still affiliated with the company, actually. And she's like, I really like talking to you. It was super cool. She and I ended up nerding out. She's one of my most favorite people, and I'm still connected with her on LinkedIn an unspoken number of years later. She put me into the actual interview process with the Convention Bureau, and I ended up meeting Andrew Wilson, which is where I learned my first and biggest tip for anybody who's going out on a job. Do not research the people you are talking to. And that is the complete opposite of what my husband believes. But for me, an introverted person who is very good at second guessing themselves, if I had known then that I was 18 years old, no, not 18, sorry, I graduated when I was 21. If I had known that I was 21 and walking into the vice president of marketing for this massive tourism company, I would have absolutely freaked out. As it was, I had already had to figure out I get really blotchy and red really easily. So I had already decided, okay, I'm going to make myself a little cute outfit. I'm going to do a turtleneck so you can't see me getting bossy and weird. And I'm going to have a scarf. And thank God it's cold outside. So tights and the whole thing worked.
So I want to pause you for 1 second there. The that blotchiness, my wife gets that as well. So
oh God, it's so stressful.
She's probably going to listen to this. And Felicia, I just had to call you out on this. But go ahead. Sorry, AK. You can go ahead and continue.
No, you're totally fine. Legit, I cannot stand crew neck garments. And I actually made this because I wanted something fun and cute. But I hate crew neck garments, but it is the only way that I can actually talk about myself without looking like a complete freak show. So yeah, I can like I'm touching right now. I can feel how red and hot my skin is. And it's so stupid because I'm not nervous talking to you. But anyway, so that's one thing that you kind of always have to keep in the back of your head. It's like, okay, well, how do I mitigate the things that I know are going to take my mind away from what I need to be talking about? No big deal. So I got hired by Andrew Wilson to do a contract for them. It was just some quick, easy contract writing. They wanted me to do research for the anniversary of the Atlanta Civil Rights Legacy. They didn't tell me what they were using it for. They didn't say anything. Just like, hey, we need you to research all of the civil rights sites in Atlanta. I'm like, okay, well, not an ad campaign. So, okay. I didn't know how else to present my work except to write it down as I went and condense it into things that sort of made sense. I think I worked on it maybe a couple of weeks. I went back to him, to Andrew, and he's like, wow, you're really good at writing. And I was like, well, yeah, dude, I thought that was the whole point, man. But cool, thanks. I'm stoked. Like, it's the first real person in the real world that complimented my work. I'm excited. And he's like, do you want to write for us? We're trying to spin up these things called blogs. Which makes
these things called blogs. It must have been a while back.
This makes me sound like I'm 112 years old. But yeah, these things called blogs. I ended up doing a almost 3-year contract with them, writing for 7 different facets of the company, including restaurants, theater, sports, which I was a travesty at, family, like how to come do with your kids and have a good time, nightlife, and history, obviously. There was another one, I can't quite remember what it was. And I had to write all 7 every week, and all of them had to have a different voice.
Oh,
so
my goodness.
that was, oh yeah. So that was my first introduction to what I felt like was a really good trial by fire of what it feels like to be a copywriter in an ad agency.
So how does that work? Because I've always been curious, we tend to hire a lot of copywriters and we don't really ask how, what the process is. We just obviously okay, this is the tone that we're looking for. This is what we want you to write about, and it's done. So how do you, I guess, how do you come up with that? How do you, if I come to you and say, hey, I want a happy tone, or I want something that's relaxed, or something that's professional. How do you decide, okay, this is going to be relaxed, or this is going to be professional, this is going to be direct? For me, it's just, it's mind boggling to find out, how exactly does that work in your mind?
Sure. So my first question back to you would be, what's the purpose? Because if you tell me you want something happy, but your purpose is to convey an important piece of messaging, happy, bubbly, dancy is not going to cut it. Except in some cases, if you're doing a really cool PSA that is directed at a specific target audience, but that's way down that hole. We talk about it a little bit, and then I have to understand who you're talking to. And the only way I know how to do that, I can't speak for other writers. The only way I know how to do that is to actually go and find these people on the internet and see how they talk. And then it's sort of a chameleon aspect of, okay, in my brain, I have an ever evolving rubric, I guess is a good way to put it, of my non-negotiables for good content. And then I figure out how to sort of overlay, almost like a filter, the types of phrases and the ways that the target audience engage. That's just how it works in my head. I honestly don't know. But at the end of the day, the one thing I can say is that I can tither thine and thus you until next week. But if the people I'm talking to don't understand what I'm saying, I'm only talking to myself. And therefore, I have not done my job.
Mm.
And that is a really hard thing to get people to understand, especially if, when we're talking specifically about small businesses, so much of the business language and so much of the dialogue around it started out with the owner's voice, because at one point in time, they were literally the only ones talking about it.
Mm.
And helping them figure out how to evolve that is really rewarding, but it is really hard, because it's like, it's sort of this creative struggle, right? And even for the people who hate social media, they've gotten so used to seeing themselves in the content because they're making the content. I actually put together for our clients moving forward, one of the things that I started doing when I first came in a little over a year ago was to build what I call a brand voice and strategy workbook. And it is this like 10-page system that I put together out of all the things that I have sort of taken away from all the different jobs I've ever had, which if you look at my LinkedIn page, it's been a lot. I was job hopping before it was cool. And it's really effective. It helps. It can be self-guided. It's kind of designed to be self-guided, because I can't do the thought work for them. I can't. I can tell them what I think it should sound like. I can tell them what I see and what I feel if I'm looking at their existing stuff, but I can't do the thinking for them. So I figured out how to sort of break it apart and do it in a way where they can handle it while they're comfortable, which sometimes means they do it in the bed. Sometimes it means they have a couple of beers, they're hanging out, they're doing whatever. And that has really helped people kind of evolve from, well, I just don't know what it's supposed to sound like. Okay, well, what does it sound like? Well, I don't know, but it just doesn't feel good. Okay. So it helps people kind of step through and figure out. And as far as like when we're sitting in a meeting, and if I'm taking on, let's say, a freelance project or any one of the agencies that I worked at, I don't think I ever worked on any fewer than 4 clients at a time, which is a lot. You have to have a brand voice guideline, and so many of them did not. So I would just kind of ask all these questions. What's the tone? What's the purpose? Who are you talking to? What does it sound like? Who's a like-minded brand in your space that sounds like what you're trying?
So is that what you're talking about? The brand voice guideline, is that everything that you're listing there that's supposed to be inside of that? Okay, gotcha.
Yes, and so few agencies have them. So I think about the third go round I had at various places, I was like, okay, forget it. I'm just going to make one for myself. I believe the first one I ever saw was created by Coca-Cola. And I just had to, we were writing, let's see, what were we, I don't even remember. It was something from Marcom. And it was just like some co-promo ads. And I was like, okay, well, I don't know the Coke language. So let me look through their stuff. We were able to access their intranet as part of a business relationship. And so I went in, and I just searched brand, and I found the brand guidelines, brand voice guideline. And I was like, great. So I printed that stuff off instantly. And I started reading through it, and I really liked the framework that they were building up. And I just sort of started logging that in the back of my head and was like, okay, well, this answers a question I would have had about blank. So now next time I go into a meeting, I'm just going to ask that question, and then I can fill in my own blank and we can move on.
So is there, sorry for interrupting you there. Is there, because I'm jotting all this down. I know that a lot of our listeners and viewers are going to want to know what this is, because you like blew past them really fast. So if there's so many in there, but if you had to give me like your top 5, so what would they be in this brand voice guideline?
Let's see. If I had to tell you the things I absolutely cannot write without, it would be who in your space is doing it better than you.
Okay.
What?
So competitors.
No.
Okay.
No. So if we're talking about lifestyle, right? Lifestyle category is pretty freaking huge. If you are selling home goods, but you really like the soothing way that was it Dansk cookware presents their stuff, I'm gonna go look at that. So what if you're selling blankets? If you like the way this sounds and it feels good and it's an overlap for your audience, I want to know about it.
Gotcha.
I probably shouldn't say this on camera, but I honestly don't care about people's competitors. I'm not worried about what everybody else is saying. I want to know what your story is, and we're going to get that out.
Love it. All right. So the who, and then what are the other 4?
So definitely who in your market is doing it better than you. I would also like to know who you think you're talking to, because a lot of times your perceived audience and your actual audience are not the same thing. And that's kind of up to your strategy team to help you decide if they can do it either through a persona or through just bland, boring market research. But having an actual idea of who is buying your stuff and who is talking to you about your stuff is really important. In fact, I took that approach when I worked at the Definition 6 agency, and we had a luxury home builder, and they were getting absolutely no traction on Instagram. And it was so frustrating because their stuff is stunning. I mean, it is absolutely tailor-made for Instagram, and it just wasn't working. And when I dug into the messaging, I was like, well, this is the information you would get if I was sitting in a sales office speaking to someone. I don't understand the level of detail, the level of attention, the breadth of different types of finished jobs that you can do. And so I created a whole persona, like, what is this girl? What is she doing? Who is she talking to? What is she like? How does she manage her money? Is she going to be a future homeowner with this particular builder? Is she going to be married? Is she trying to be married? Like, what are we looking at here? And I built this entire fictional human and then used her as the lens for all of the content that we wrote from there on out. And there was a marked noticeable change in audience engagement and just how the company was feeling about their content themselves. And that actually ended up pivoting to being the brand voice for all the digital, because once you started digging into it and breaking it down, people weren't converting because they weren't seeing the value. And if you're not sitting there in the room to explain it to them, you got to come at it a different way.
Gotcha.
That was a pretty cool win.
It sounds like it. Okay. So then you got the who, essentially who you're trying to target. What's the next one?
The next one is, what words don't you want to have associated with your business?
Nice.
And that's one that a lot of people don't think about.
Yeah, I didn't think about that either.
So we have a brewery client who specifically uses historic brewing techniques from the old Sarum village in England. He is a total history buff. He's fascinating, but he takes all of these old ways and blends in new local agriculture from North Carolina. So it tastes totally different, and it's wild to me. And when I was building out his brand voice, I was really deliberate to say this, not that. They are traditional. They are not stale. And that is a very interesting kind of emotional pivot, right? Because you're like, okay, well, oh, it's tradition. I don't want to be encumbered by traditions, and it's old and it's boring and it's gross. But it's not. If you look at it from an education aspect, there is so much to learn and so much to understand, and you can dig in and start breaking down the flavor profiles and figuring out, well, what happened here and what makes this of this versus of that. That is forward-thinking, knowledge-seeking, brand new, cool stuff. It's anything but stale. But unless you ask the question very specifically, how do you not want to be perceived? People usually don't even go there.
Nice. I did not.
And
this is all gold. I'm like, okay, what's next? Yeah. So, okay. So what's the next one that you would say is important?
Okay. So let's see. We talked about who else is doing it better than you. Who do you think you're talking to? How you don't want to be perceived. Yep. And I think the next question is really, how do you want to sound in your content? And that's a little bit of a shift from just a straight tone. It's all kind of the same thing, but for my purposes, a tone is, we are blank, blank, and blank. But a lot of times people don't have the strategy and the brand foundation and the market research to actually just list it out like that for you. So for me, how do you want to sound on any of your content? Specifically for us, it's only social, which can be a pivot from the rest of your marketing tools. And they're like, okay, well, I want it to be happy and enlightening. Okay, well, happy could be juvenile. It could be aloof. It could be clueless. It could be superficial. So what is happy to you? And then the enlightening part, are you talking about religious enlightenment? Are you talking about, oh, that's really cool, I didn't know that? And you start to create, and your brand starts to become this feed full of little pocketable bites that you just sort of grab and remember and throw it out in conversation every now and then, kind of like you're feeding pigeons. Super weird. Yeah. We actually have a client that we have pivoted almost their entire feed to those sort of knowledge nuggets. And it's incredibly effective. When we were busting out, 2 and 3 paragraphs with content for them, it wasn't getting a ton of engagement because that's not what people were trying to do with it. They just wanted something that they could quick take away and then pull it out when they needed it. And it took a long time to help that particular client understand why that was a value add and not a miss.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like it. So thank you so much for supplying us with all these little gold nuggets. And I know there's, a lot more that goes into this brand voice guideline, which I'm 100% going to start researching into, because I feel like our company definitely needs to jump on board with that. But
I'd be happy to send you my workbook.
Oh, send it through. So I wanted to kind of shift gears a little bit and, direct more towards like our listeners, which is, wanting to find out how they exactly get into, where do they start? Whether it be copywriter, which obviously seems like you just need to obviously practice and get involved, but specifically with a content director, like how does a person just start? Like what are the first steps?
So you don't just start it. It is not a fad diet or a juice cleanse. You can't just pick it up on the weekend and go, cool, I'm gonna do this now. For me, having not actually worked with a content director in that specific role, I had to kind of work backwards and think about all of the people that I worked with who were higher up than me, who did something besides me in a director capacity. What did they do? What do I need? And how do I need to brush up? So I started January 4th, 2021 as the content director. In addition to that, about 5 months prior to that, I was tying up a 6-month stint at a grocery store. I went, in the course of less than 3 months, I went from making $70,000 a year to making $7.65 an hour after taxes.
Mm.
And I was angry. And my dad actually said something the other day when we were talking about it, and it made me cry a little bit. Which was an interesting reaction, because my first reaction was to be pissed. He's like, I am so proud of you for taking that grocery store job. He's like, you took an astronomical pay cut, but you didn't even stop. You went run right to the other. I'm more proud of you for that than any of the other jobs you had. And I'm like, we run our own company. What are you talking? Oh my God. But then I stopped to think about it, and I was like, okay, so I actually really appreciate him recognizing the emotional toll that it took, because coming out of a industry where you are recognized and applauded for the amount of education that you're getting, the amount of experience you have. I walked into this grocery store in a pair of baggy khaki pants and a men's medium polo shirt. Nobody knew that I have a college degree. Nobody knows that I'm running my own business. Nobody knows that I've been freelance writing for 12 years at that point. Nobody had any idea that I was anything other than just the girl in the back who's stocking the eggs. And it was such an emotional upheaval to have people assume that I was less than, simply because I happened to have on a uniform versus my outfit with my cool hair and my glasses and my lipstick and wearing whatever the hell I feel like that day. And it was hard. It was hard ass work, man. Like, I come home busted AF every day. My legs look like I had been in a car wreck. So many bruises, so many scrapes, because you're just lifting pallets and stuff that weighs up to 80 pounds and you're doing it for 80 hours. I mean, I got ripped, which was solid, but we are not doing that shit again. But I took the same work ethic from that experience. And the only reason I did it was because I got fired and my husband wanted to try this thing. And I'm like, you know what? We have savings for the first time in our life from selling our house and moving up here. I want to hang on to that because, oh, by the way, this is 2 weeks into the COVID pandemic. Nobody knows what's going on. Nobody knows what the hell's coming next. I wanted to hang on to all the cash we could just in case. So I'm like, all right, cool. Well, I'll go over here and, I'll just do this stuff. I'll be able to knock it out. It's no big deal. I worked, in high school. I worked in a retail store. I did a little bit of waitressing at the Sonic. I did not wear the skates. I figured it'd be fine. No big deal. A couple hours a week. I worked 38 hours a week, so they could not pay me benefits. Super tacky. Yeah, real nice. Part-time, you see. There was a lot there to unpack, and I was like, wow, holy crapola. Okay. In addition to doing that and feeling like an actual garbage fire every night after I got home, I was sitting online taking classes in digital brand strategy, in content creation for social media. Now keep in mind, I've been writing content and doing content stuff for almost 15 years, but I do not have a good grasp on social media. The way I do my own content has absolutely no place in doing content on behalf of a client. So I needed to learn, and I had to go all the way back to the basics, and it was hard because I'm sitting here, I'm like, okay, I'm good. I know how to write. I'm solid. Let's do this. No, I'm not. So there was one particular class called I think it's called the Fuck It System for Good Content. And it's
nice.
It is created by Demi Katsouras, and she's based in Australia. If you've ever looked at a globe, you know how much further away Australia is than Western North Carolina. So to do her classes, because I found her online, I was super into what she had to say. I liked the way she delivered it. It was just a solid, no bullshit plan. And she kept you tight and right week by week by week, which is something that I needed, that structure at that time, because my emotions, my mental capacity was just all over the place. But I knew at the end of the day, I had blank and blank to deliver. And so I did. The only minor problem is that because it was taught in Australia, it was 2 a.m. our time. So I'm working 8-9 hours at a grocery store, coming home, too tired to eat, can't function, took a nap on the couch, got up and sat through hour, 2 hours worth of Zoom meetings to do this class because we're full swing pandemic by this point. So everything is remote. I used the General Assembly for some classes, had a great class with, what's his name? Fat Shyam, I think. I'm probably ruining his last name, but he's a very well-respected journalist who took his journalism techniques and turned it into a way to create what he called story branding, which I thought was really awesome. It has nothing to do with the process story branding, which as a professional writer, I don't care for.
And what was I'm trying to look it up right here. You said it was called what? The fuck it what?
I can go to socialborough.com, click on about, scroll down to the section where I am, and I've got it listed out as my new skills or learned skills or something down there at the bottom.
Gotcha. Sorry, continue. I want to look this up while you're talking here.
Oh, she's phenomenal. I'm doing that. I'm doing classes, I'm learning, I'm digging in. And my first and only thought when I looked at Frank and said, "Hey babe, you seem really stressed. What's going on?" He's like, "I can't handle this content all by myself." He's like, Social Borough freaking exploded during COVID. And I don't know how that happened. And I am so deeply grateful that it did, because so many businesses, big, small, and otherwise, just didn't make it, or they're still struggling. And that is something that we think about honestly every single day. And at the end of the first year, at the end of 2020, he's like, "Babe, I'm stressed. I can't do this. I think I need to hire somebody." And I was like, "Well, what do you need?" I don't have time to do the writing. I'm really into the data. I'm really into the actual visual content creation, but the writing, God, it just takes so long. And I'm like, "Well, I write stuff. Why don't you hire me?"
Exactly.
Yeah. Sounds super easy, right?
Sounds like it, but I know it's a little more complicated.
Sounds great. Fortunately, we work well together. We've always worked well together. God, when we're on the same wavelength, it stand back. This bitch is on fire and is ready to roll, and I love it. But I came to him and said, "Well, hey, why don't you hire me as your senior copywriter?" Because that had been my role for about 5 years. That was what I was comfortable with. It's what I was calling myself. And he's like, "No, you're a content director." And I'm like, "No, I'm not. No, I can't be. I'm not. No one's ever called me that before." Which, if you stop and think about it, is a really shit way to assume your identity and your skill set. But hey, I was like, all right, well, fine. If that's my argument, well, he just called me one. So now what's my excuse?
Yeah.
And
it makes me think with labels like that, it's very interesting, right? I don't know if you saw the thing that Elon Musk came out and was talking about that, right? So have you seen this? So he was basically, he was getting interviewed and they asked him like, "Oh, do you plan on retiring, as the CEO and appointing someone else?" And he actually turned around and was like, all these titles are just superficial things that people put on you, right? So he's like, the only true ones like that actually matter is what the government sees, which is like CEO, I forgot the ones that are on when you apply for like a S corporation kind of thing. So, but he was going through each one and he was like, everything else it doesn't even matter. So it's like, it's all about your skill set and what you can actually bring to the company is what matters. All these little labels that corporate America tries to place on you is bullshit. So it's very interesting to hear you say that. Yeah. But sorry for interrupting. Continue. Go.
No, I love having this conversation with you. It's so much fun.
Yeah.
You're exactly right. I was like, I don't know what to call me. I was like, I don't care. Like, I'm the writer. That's fine. I have been the writer for 15 years. Like, it's cool. So many of the ad agencies that I worked at and the non-ad agencies that I worked at had never had a true copywriter, which after a while started to be a flag. Not a red one, but probably an orange one.
Yeah.
and that brought along with it so many other things, because if you don't have a copywriter, then that means you haven't done a deep dive into strategic messaging. So now I've got to add that layer on it. When I stepped back the other day and I looked at, and people are like, "What do you do?" And I was like, And I started thinking about it, and I was like, wow, okay, so I do brand strategy, I do messaging, I do actual content writing, I do copy proofing for one of our clients because they have 20 different people that submit content every single week. But I'm also editing the photos that they sent me off of their cell phone. I have to go in and I have to think about, okay, let me look at this content calendar and figure out what goes here. And if we're talking about a year-long flight plan, what does that look like? I am not a girl who does spreadsheets. I hate them. But sometimes they're necessary. And when it comes to, I'm also a dog mom, I'm also a wife, I'm also a business owner, I'm also this and this and this. And it's like, damn, son, can I just be me?
Yeah. And it also, it seems to, only come from, the employer side, right? So the employer is the one that wants to attach that. But 9 times out of 10, when you're speaking to a brand, or if it's a small business, they just care if they're getting treated properly, if you're listening to them, which is huge, right? And if you're bringing value to the table. So like, they don't care if, let's say, you have a junior designer that comes in and creates this logo that is a masterpiece, right? They're not going to care and say, oh, this junior designer designed this. They're not going to say that. They're going to say, wow, how amazing was this product that you produced? Not only did you listen to what I asked for, but you brought value to the table, right? But on the other side of the coin, which is the employer, it feels like they need to establish I don't want to say dominance, but a sense of like chain of command, where it's like, okay, we have to put you in this area because you have to have someone not only overseeing you from the top, but also from the bottom, which is weird, especially in like the agency world. It's just, it just blows my mind every time that, I'm speaking to people and they feel like they need to be put into this little bitty ball, right? And they're like, oh, well, I got to stick to just directing, right? And I can't also be a cinematographer, and I can't also be a screenplay writer, because then it makes it look like I'm a what is that expression?
Pick one.
Yeah, I can't pick one, but
there's all trades.
Yeah, there it is, a jack of all trades, but they're saying master of
none.
Master of none. That's it. So easy, but I don't like, fundamentally, I disagree with that, right? Because I feel like you can be good at multiple things, not just one thing, So now I'm stepping on my soapbox. Okay.
And you're fine, because I'm right there with you. I'm about to build I'm building a deck for your soapbox right now.
Gotcha.
Because I'm ready to go. And that bitch is going to be lit up like the Great White Way from 1920s Broadway in New York City. So here's my thing. My resume looks like I can't commit to shit. And that is fundamentally 110% absolutely inaccurate. There were so many nights where I was literally the only person in this building. Me and the janitorial staff got along great. It's 9 o'clock, it's 10 o'clock, it's 11 o'clock, and I am there by myself, hammering it the fuck out, because I don't know what it means to write a script. I don't know what it means to sit here and go through the initial round of casting for a commercial for a news station rebrand. And I'm like, what the hell am I doing? I got hired in my first ad agency because the other person that interviewed wrote a cat blog. That was what they brought to the table, was a cat blog. I brought 3 years worth of marketing content that had been blended into print documents, radio spots, websites, but it all happened kind of out from up under me. All I knew is that I knew how to research stuff and write about stuff that wasn't necessarily something that I had any particular prior knowledge about. I show up and I'm like, great. And they hired me for their CRM department, which is email communication on behalf of a corporation, basically. And at one point I was writing over 60 emails a month because we had to do one a week. Each round we had to present 3 options, and we did about 3 rounds of reviews per week prior to launching it come Friday. It was a lot. And so I'm like, great, you hired me to do this. And they're like, oh yeah, cool. By the way, we're doing a microsite for the holiday for this one particular client. We need you to write a holiday digital catalog. And I'm like, I don't know about that. So I'm going to sit here. I'm going to read. I'm going to research. I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to figure out what I'm going to do. And because I was the only one that was doing that work, I amassed so much deliverables from each job that I had no problem leaving too soon. It was not too soon. It was time to go. I left my first ad agency to go work at Emory's business school in their marketing department. They had just paid to have a really cool brand built for them, but they didn't have the staff or the staff with the experience to actually roll it out in a true campaign fashion. I went from writing some emails, and by some, I mean a metric crap ton. Also some website work, occasionally some like social media headers, kind of whatever, to, oh, hey, by the way, we're developing 2 new MBA programs. I need you to research them and figure out why people who have a military career would want to get an MBA. And also we're bringing one on for women. So I need you to write for them too. And oh, hey, cool, super awesome. By the way, we're rebranding and there's an event that we're hosting in September. I need you to write billboards. I need you to write plane train ads for the Atlanta airport. I need you to write the I don't even know what they're called. There's the big poster things that are on top of the escalators when you're coming up from the train in the airport. I need you to write underwriting spots for NPR because it's advertising, but it's not advertising because legal rules. And so you can't say blank, blank, and blank, which basically means you can't say anything.
Yeah.
So I took this, it was very interesting to me to realize that my first like true campaign work was not at an ad agency. And I absolutely loved that job. I took a massive pay cut to go there because I was so excited and so inspired to be with these people. And the lady that hired me is Angela Bostic. And,
shout out to Angela.
Oh, shout out to Angela.
I don't know if you're Angela going to listen or not. Yeah, I don't know if she's listening or not, but shout out to Angela. But Alyson,
I don't know if she's listening or not.
Oh, well, if
she's now the director of marketing for Wharton Business School, so she might be busy.
Hopefully, let's see if she is or not. But Alyson, sure. So we, believe it or not, we've actually come to time.
No.
And so
I have a whole list.
I know. I told you it was going to be very casual and dive into things and a lot of gold nuggets that we were able to dig out. But okay. I want to, finish it off with one question, which is if you had one piece of advice for someone who's listening right now, who's deciding to go whether into, the content director or copywriter, or just in general into the creative space, what piece of advice would you give them?
I thought you might ask that. So I have been debating my answer. And I think my answer is no matter what avenue of career creative that you're going into, you will not be a good one until you are a good listener. That's really boring, but if you are in the room and you're not listening to the client who says, I need to reconnect with this audience, I don't feel like this aspect of my brand is coming through, I don't think that resembles us in a way that I'm comfortable with. Whether you're doing cinematography, directing, copywriting, creative directing, because sometimes they don't listen so good. Anything. If you're not listening, you're not meeting the brief. It is not on you to decide what the outcome is. It is on you to look at the brief and decide how best to execute what has been asked for. Now, if you do buy the book and you do buy the brief, and everything's good and it still falls flat, now you have an opportunity to have a conversation. Now you start to do your talking. But if you don't listen first, you're not going to get anywhere. And those meetings are miserable for everyone involved. Yeah. So,
Alyson, it was an absolute pleasure to bring you onto the show. You had so many good things to say, and the advice that you give to our listeners is priceless. We hope to bring you back on the show, within the next couple months to see where Social Burro is at and where you're at. Hopefully we can get your husband on here, right? And give his
totally. He'd be so in. Before we go, I do want to say, especially for your listeners who are trying to become career creatives, one of the things that we didn't touch on that I have done a lot of is resume rewriting, both for myself and for a lot of other people. If you have anybody that's struggling with trying to change a job or just trying to break into it to begin with, send them my way. I'm happy to help them out with a resume.
Yeah. So I was going to ask you, so where can people reach out and basically get in contact with you? I know you're on social media. If you want to go ahead and give us those, give us the website as well. And we'll also link it in the description below. So you guys can just check that out. So go ahead, Alyson, you have the floor.
Oh, Lord. So my email address is super simple. It's ak@socialburrow.com, BURRO. Website is the same, socialburrow.com. We are the same across all our social media channels. My personal Instagram is currently private, but if you find me, you can send me a message and I might let you in.
Fantastic. Well, okay. Well, again, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on.
Absolutely. I had a great time.
Thanks.